Welcome back to Advocacy, Alchemy with Professor Ross. Today we have a good one, guys. Just 4 days before Christmas, a pursuit in Killeen, Texas didn't end on the road. It went straight through the front doors of a JCPenney inside the Killeen Mall. The driver met his demise, but let's step into the what-if scenario. If he had survived, what charges would he be facing? And beyond that, who pays for the property damage, the injuries, the chaos caused inside the mall? Today we're breaking it all down and we're using Texas law. So with that, let's jump in.
Footage from DPS trooper Brody Telfer's dash cam shows him waiting along I-35 South in Belton after DPS says they received reports from Temple PD of a reckless driver in a truck.
Good copy, right there approaching you.
The truck then comes into view and the pursuit begins, lasting for about 11 minutes. As they exit onto I-14 towards Killeen, the trooper attempts a pit maneuver to stop the driver, but it is unsuccessful. Then, as they reach the Killeen Mall, the driver suddenly pulls off the highway. A witness captured this video on her dash cam of the truck driving off the highway and toward the mall. The driver eventually pulls into the mall, driving through the crowded parking lot, which is packed with Christmas shoppers. Things suddenly take a turn for the worse when the driver does something completely unexpected, driving straight through the doors of JCPenney's.
Oh my God!
Body camera footage from Trooper Telfer, who is right behind the truck as everything happened, shows him immediately rushing inside with his gun out.
Out of the way! Out of the way! Come out of the way!
As you can see, by the time he reaches the truck, it has already driven through most of the store, leaving behind it a trail of destruction. We then see and hear as the trooper starts firing into the truck, whose driver is trying to drive further into the mall. He's joined by a Killeen police officer, a KISD police officer, and 2 other off-duty officers with local agencies.
I'm gonna break this way. All right.
Afterwards, we see authorities slowly approaching the truck, which has stopped moving after crashing into an office space, the wheels still moving. After approaching the truck, officers confirm the suspect is dead, removing him from the truck and then searching it. We are not showing that part of the video because of how graphic it is. Afterwards, Trooper Telfer's body cam shows him walking back through the store, showing the extent of the damage and multiple people being treated on the ground for their injuries.
Hey, where's suspect? Back there on the right.
Hey, he's gonna run around. Michael door.
He's over right here.
All right, so once again, that's a tragedy. Don't wish that upon anyone. Be safe when you're out shopping this year during Christmas time and during our upcoming Black Friday sales. This happened in Texas. Let's use the Texas laws. Let's go over a few of these. First, evading arrest with a vehicle. This is found at the Texas Penal Code, Section 38.04, Section B2A. This crime is defined as when someone intentionally flees from a peace officer using a motor vehicle. Now, this carries a penalty of a 3rd-degree felony. That's up to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. Now here, there's an 11-minute chase that happened from Belton into Killeen, Texas. That easily qualifies as evading arrest with a vehicle. Now moving on to our next statute, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. This is found at the Texas Penal Code, Section 22.02. It says, anytime a person is going to cause serious bodily injury to another or threatening them using a deadly weapon. Now, vehicles can count as a deadly weapon, especially under the Texas law, and especially in a situation like this. This is a 2nd-degree felony. It carries up to 20 years in prison. And like I said, when you're going to injure mall patrons while driving through recklessly, all while trying to get away from the police, you're just stacking felonies on top of each other, okay? Our next crime, criminal mischief or property damage. Anytime you hear that term, criminal mischief, that's what it means. Somebody caused some property damage. Now, this is codified at the Texas Penal Code, section 28.03. It says, anytime a person intentionally or recklessly damages or destroys property of another person. Now, this depends on the value to determine what level of penalty a person will receive, or the status and classification of what type of crime it is. Now here, based on the value that we can even see, all right, doors all the way through the mall, tearing up all kinds of stuff, hurting people. This is over $300,000 worth of damage, and that would take it into the first degree felony classification. But just giving you an overview of what those classifications are. All right, anything from $2,500 to $30,000, that's just state jail time. We're talking about 6 months to 2 years in state jail, up to $10,000 worth of fine. All right, now anything from $30,000 to $150,000, that's a third degree felony. From 2 to 10 years in prison, fine up to $10,000. Anything from $150,000 to $300,000 worth of damage is a second degree felony. That carries anything from 2 years in prison to 20 years in prison, a fine of up to $10,000. Now, anything above $300,000, like we're talking about here, is a first degree felony. A person could be looking at from 5 years to 99 years or life, and you still have that fine of up to $10,000. Now, crashing a truck through JCPenney's entrance during the most busy season of the year, I think that easily pushed the damages well into this first degree range. All right, let's move on to our next charge, reckless driving. Now, this is covered under the Texas Transportation Code, section 545.401. It says, driving a vehicle with willful or wanton disregard for the safety of other persons or property makes a person liable for reckless driving. Now, the penalty is a misdemeanor, up to 30 days in county jail, or a fine of up to $200. Now, this charge by itself is fairly small, but when we're talking about in the context of everything that happens, it shows a record of sort of reckless conduct. All right, next, let's talk about restitution. That's when you have to pay back money for any damages done or any harm done, injuries, things like that. Now, under the Texas Code, Article 42.037. Now, courts can order restitution for victims that have losses that pertain directly to a crime. It creates a financial liability on the defendant, and it's enforceable through that person's probation conditions or as a civil judgment. So what exactly does that mean for everybody involved here? So that means the victim's medical bills, their lost wages, JCPenney's property loss, and some of these people, I mean, they could have lost property too. They would have had, all those things come into play if the driver survived. Now, also keep in mind that all those things still come into play even in the state the driver is now, because a state could be liable. If he's a person of means, if he has some money out there, then someone could go after that money that's still here. All right, next, let's move into the evidentiary standards, okay? They still are at play because anytime that there's going to be some legal action involved, you have to move through these evidentiary standards. Okay, we talk about 6 evidentiary standards daily. We're going to move through the weakest to the strongest. All right, let's start with mere suspicion. Now, when the government or the police only have a mere suspicion, that means they just have a hunch. There's no concrete proof. And because of that, the government can't take any action against us or anyone else. Now, what's going to happen is the police and the government are going to take a closer look, though, to see if there's going to be some criminal violation that occurs. Now, moving up, we go to reasonable suspicion. Now, at this level, the police and the government have specific and articulable facts that a crime might be happening, or sometime you might hear that criminal activity is afoot. Now, a good example here is when the trooper sees the truck swerving on I-35, and at that point he has grounds to initiate a traffic stop. Moving up a level, probable cause. Now, this is when the police or the government have enough evidence that would lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime has been committed and the suspect is directly involved. Here we have a driver that refuses to pull over, runs into a crowded mall, now is the point for a lawful arrest. this is where charges like evading and aggravated assault get locked in. Moving up a level, preponderance of the evidence. Now at this level, the government or these injured people here, this is where they sue someone in civil court. This is the civil standard, and it means more likely than not, a person's claim is true. All that's required to win is just 51% of the evidence being in their favor. Here, anyone injured, if they decide to sue JCPenney, say for their injuries because they could have prevented this, they would only need to show it's more likely the store lacked protective barriers that could have lessened the harm. All that's in civil territory. Now moving up one more level, we have clear and convincing evidence. Now this is higher than preponderance, and it's used for things like punitive damages or terminating rights. A perfect example is to punish JCPenney for gross negligence. Plaintiffs would need to clearly show management ignored known safety risks. Now, to win at this level, a person or the government needs to have about 75% of the evidence in their favor. Now, once again, as we said, this is used in the types of cases where you're going to terminate some rights or when you're going to really need more evidence to win. Finally, we have beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, this is the gold standard for criminal convictions. Prosecutors must meet this standard for every element of the crimes they charge a person with. This level means there's no other logical conclusion besides the defendant being guilty of the charges that are brought. Here, if things were different, prosecutors would need to prove without a reasonable doubt that the driver knowingly used his truck as a deadly weapon inside a mall. And I think this is where those long felony sentences would come into play. We've seen over the last few years a string of people around the world who want to run into crowds intentionally, right? And that's why they have these certain laws set up that have these long sentences. All right, next let's move into the jury perspective. Let's put ourselves on this jury. Now let's step into the jury box and imagine we're hearing this case and the driver survived. Now on the criminal side, would you find beyond a reasonable doubt that the person using the truck to barrel through JCPenney counts as aggravated assault with a deadly weapon? Or do you see it as reckless driving gone horribly out of control? Now, on the civil side, if you were one of the injured shoppers, who would you hold responsible? Just the driver and potentially his estate? Or would you also look at JCPenney and the mall's owners and ask, why didn't you have protective barriers in front of the doors? Think about the design question. Was it foreseeable that someone could weaponize a vehicle in this way, and should businesses anticipate that risk? If so, is failing to install pylons a form of negligence? All right, now here's a harder question. Now, if you were in the damages phase of the trial, how much restitution would you award the injured shoppers? Because you know insurance will cover a bulk portion of that. But the estate of the driver could still be pursued. One final question. Ask yourself this. Now, if you're standing in the mall 4 days before Christmas, would your intuition have told you something dangerous was about to happen? Or would you be surprised, like most of us? And would you be affected because of this? Think about it. After something like this happens, who's going shopping during a busy time like this, where something unfortunate can happen? All right, finally, so if 53-year-old John Schultz survived, would you find him guilty or not guilty? And why? Also, how much time would you give? We talked about some different levels and the amount of time. This is a short but powerful case study that shows how one reckless decision can ripple across criminal law, civil liability, and public safety. Now, if the driver had survived, he'd be facing a mountain of charges, from evading arrest to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and criminal mischief at its highest felony level when you calculate out the massive property damage. Now, on top of all this, there's still going to be some restitution orders that would follow him, and potentially his estate is likely going to be tied up in some lawsuits for years. Now, on the civil side, you have injured shoppers who could sue both his estate and potentially the mall. depending on whether the lack of protective barriers is viewed as negligence. Ultimately, insurance is going to cover much of the damage, but these events remind us that someone pays through premiums, through higher costs, through court-ordered restitution. This incident also sparks the bigger question: could better design have prevented all of this? Concrete pylons or reinforced entrances might have stopped that truck, protected lives, and prevented the driver's demise. That's where criminal law meets tort law, and where public safety and architecture are going to overlap. So our lesson today is a simple one. One person's flight from the law can turn into a multi-million-dollar disaster with consequences that stretch far beyond that one moment in time. And as future jurors, lawyers, or those wanting to be informed citizens, it's our job to ask not just what happened, but who's going to pay for this? How do we prevent this from happening again? Remember, this is Advocacy Alchemy, and I am Professor Ross. I'll see you tomorrow. Everyone have a great day. Everyone stay safe out there.
If you've got ideas or videos you want me to lecture on, send them to the queue. And come back tomorrow at 8:45 a.m. for another lecture.